So Deathwatch have got a new and shiny Primaris kit, and the first miniature updates they've had in the more modern era of Warhammer 40k Space Marines. There's plenty of fun stuff with Gravis Marines with frag cannons, and a rather fancy looking reincarnated Xenophase blade, though not everyone's happy with the new kit, and it still seems likely to restrict some datasheet options. Let's talk about how Deathwatch got here, and a slightly deeper dive into their new models in Warhammer 40k. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Deathwatch, and in this video I thought we'd do a focused look at the new Kill Team kit, which I feel like has some argument to be the single biggest model reveal for Warhammer 40k in the last preview. The kit represents the latest incarnation of the Deathwatch Kill Team, the Deathwatch of course being the militant wing of the Ordo Xenos, the alien hunting branch of the Inquisition, the idea being that different chapters will lend their strength and expertise to the Watch Fortress. Deathwatch Marines do a tour of duty with them, assembling crack teams worth of specialists to be able to pursue a given target and get access to some of the most fun and fancy gear that the Imperium has to offer, including things like frag cannons and special issue ammunition. In the lore they're more commonly known in small forces. I feel like quite an easy one to talk about narratively, with different Space Marines coming together to show the characteristics of different chapters, and they certainly had a fun starring role at the start of Space Marine 2. Certainly making them way more widely known, first and foremost, in one of the biggest and most famous bits of Warhammer media so far. For the Deathwatch miniatures that have preceded this, they did have a classic upgrade kit to upgrade teams of Space Marines to them, heading back from around the turn of the millennium sometime, but their modern model range got a release wave in 2016, so kind of just before the dawn of the Primaris, first coming out with Kill Team Cassius on the bottom right here fighting against the Genestealer cults, then being expanded into a full army with more flexible kits plus their Corvus Blackstar, though they have generally tended to be one of 40k's least widely collected factions. When I did polls on the subject in the past, it looked like around just under 5% of people collect Deathwatch, fairly solidly behind even their next closest rivals in Black Templars and Space Wolves, both of which had more like 6.5% each. I guess the Space Wolves might have risen recently. It might have been because they had kind of recent model releases that Games Workshop neglected them compared with the rest. They just didn't get any sort of post-8th edition or Primaris era support. All the other major chapters getting upgrade sprues and at least one token lieutenant in their chapter's iconography, and the Black Templars having their big release in 9th edition. They'd been getting support of one of 40k's more mainstream armies before that, but then in 10th edition Games Workshop seemed to think about removing them as a mainstream faction, unceremoniously rolling them into the Agents of the Imperium, and basically meaning that Deathwatch players that had collected a bunch of other Space Marine units weren't able to use them, and on top of that making their rules a bit more bland and incredibly underpowered into the bargain. They didn't really last like that all too long before they decided to revert course a bit and release a digital index for them. That came out around Christmas time with the Grottimus update, and I kind of wonder if it might have been the major 40k media things that inspired them to revisit them. Maybe it looks a bit silly if they're a big role in Space Marine 2, they're going to be a focal feature of the upcoming Astartes 2, and they also had another third-party animation team make a cool animation with some Primaris Deathwatch in. I feel like between all that it was just a bit of a disparity between their treatment and sending a bunch of their unique units to Legends. I'm sure people collecting their army weren't shy about voicing their opinions to Games Workshop either. With their treatment this way though, with Games Workshop not releasing any more models for them in the more recent era, and not thinking the faction's important enough to have a codex, it feels like it's probably not driven up player numbers, probably the opposite. There's definitely the sense that just about anything Firstborn is going to be on borrowed time and updated to Primaris, so I guess most people didn't really want to jump into collecting an entire army of Firstborn, even if some enjoyed it. Plus things might just be a bit more uncertain for the future compared with some. Their Primaris kill teams seem to get rejigged in terms of how their rules are interpreted each edition, plus not knowing if they're going to bother to give them a codex or good rules next time around. The digital index in 10th edition does mean that they're at least doing significantly better from a gameplay point of view though. I feel like their kill team bespoke rules all make them interesting enough. Really big punchy power units with some genuinely good shooting amped up by their special issue ammunition, and some nice supporting rules from their Black Spear task force and their enhancements. Weirdly, over the last 6 months or so, they flipped from being win rates right at the very top of 40k going down to right at the bottom. It seems that not many people are having too much success with them, either casually or in competitive at the moment. Win rates are around about 42% either way. I don't know if it might have just been a few strong players abandoning the faction in favour of other stuff recently. I certainly rate them as having enough strength to compete with the vast majority of 40k factions at the moment though. In particular, their Indomitor kill teams, their Terminator squads, and Deathwatch veterans, often led by characters, are all pretty big sources of strength, and they do have a lot of Space Marine support units that they can draw on. Of course though, now they're having their new models updated, Games Workshop dropped some heavy hints that it'll be happening in their big summer preview show, and also their regular Veterans kit was marked as sold out online, and that was done at the same time as they had the teaser with the Deathwatch hat. So between that, seemed pretty guaranteed they will be getting some sort of update. It looks like the Firstborn Veteran kit won't be on sale anymore though. Maybe a shame given that it's a relatively recent one as 40k Firstborn kits go. 9 years old isn't too terrible in 40k terms, and it was quite a fun and flexible one with quite a lot of character. As mentioned though, it looks like it's time for the Deathwatch Kill Team update. They are being released as a kill team that's also functional in the game Kill Team, which does kind of make sense really, as they are perhaps the archetypal kill team. That's maybe the first thing that you think about for 40k units that function that way outside of this specific game mode. They're going to be coming out in this Kill Team Tomb World box set, and they're going to be fighting against the Necrons in that. They can Optex Circle units, some warriors, and some Necron terrain. I'd guess the whole thing is going to be around about the £100 or $170 mark. That's what Kill Team Typhon was, though I guess that was maybe a bigger kit than some of them. If we're lucky, maybe it could be a little bit less. The usual pattern for these ones, though, is for Games Workshop not to make enough of them. So it seems like there's a good chance that these might sell out very, very quickly and then not come back in print. And people who want to pick up the Deathwatch Kill Team individually will probably have to wait another 3 or 4 months after that, as they'll probably be released alongside the Nets vs box set for Kill Team that we don't know the identity of at this point. We've only just had this one revealed. Overall, it seems like it's going to be quite a long time before the Kill Team actually goes on full individual sale. Before we jump into the new models themselves, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Tabletop Stronghold. If you are looking to get some 40k miniatures from A to B in safety, they're one option to do so. They basically make purpose-built magnetic carry cases for the job. They're based in the USA, though ship to many places around the world, and they have a 25% off code in AT25. The idea behind magnetic storage is that you attach magnets to the bases of your miniatures, then you can line them up on surfaces. These ones use steel trays, so you can fit really quite a lot of models all in one compact space without them moving around too much or rattling on each other. Tabletop Stronghold's particular take on that is to house those within a sturdy MDF box, really quite notably hard to break or damage once it's assembled. Those steel trays can be raised and lowered and slide in at different levels depending on the height of the miniatures that you're transporting. And then on the front there's a clear acrylic sheet, so you can basically have protection for the models at the front but still see what's where. Seeing nice paint jobs is a positive as well when you're transporting or storing stuff. Broadly speaking, reviews that I've seen have generally been quite positive about them, maybe just being a little bit heavier than some, perhaps one criticism. Overall, most people I've seen have had pretty good feedback though. If you want to check out their range, there'll be links down in the video description. In any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one, and I'll talk through a few of their designs at the end of the video. Let's get into the main event though, which are the new models themselves. When they eventually release, it looks like they'll be called the Deathwatch Kill Team. On their social media, they have that as their main title, describing them as elite Space Marine Xenos hunters. In preview shows and things, Games Workshop aren't often enormously clear as to how the sprues are set up, but it looks like it's pretty possible to work out from these guys. The box set of them, when it's sold for Kill Team, will get 10 Primaris Marines in one box set. And within that set, there's a mix of armor marks. There's 2 Gravis Marines and 2 Phobos Marines, the other 6 being more standard Tacticus armor. They do have quite a lot of war gear options that we'll go through in just a second, but for understanding it, it looks like basically you've got 2 copies of a 5-man box set rather than one 10-man entirely different sprues, and then each one of those 5-man models can be assembled in 2 different ways, and the Gravis one has got 3 different options that you can build out of it. This feels like it was pretty expected for a more modern 40k kit. It often generally tends to have individual poses of miniatures and then different ways that you can build that posed model, but certainly has trade-offs such as, say, versus the previous Veterans box set, without being quite as freeform as to which models you arm with what. I'd guess the eventual price for them will be £47.50, $80 or €62.50. That's based on the more expensive Kill Team box sets, and in particular ones like the Scouts and the Striking Scorpions, both of which have a similar sort of setup to this, being 2 smaller squads all put together in one big box. They will also absolutely be getting an updated 40k datasheet to go alongside. There's some war gear options that don't really track onto the current kit, things like the Plasma Incinerator and the Gravis armor, so it looks like they will have an updated datasheet as to replace the Firstborn Veterans one, which I'd guess will be sent to Legends. Going through the miniatures one by one though, first up we have the dual build for this one. It looks like you can either make a Watch Sergeant out of him or a Blade Master with a Xenophase blade. And this one looks like it answers the Server Skull Inquisition rumour engine thing, which both of these are stylishly modelling here. You can tell they're made up from the same base model with the purity seals and pouches and things. I guess the heads will be quite freeform, maybe a bit of theme for each chapter. Looks like they've paired up the sort of Mongolian style head along with the White Scar shoulder pad there. and seems that the default loadout for the Watch Sergeant might be a power sword and plasma pistol. Could have more choices, of course, I suppose. Then we've got the Gravis Marines, and looks like there's 3 different ways to build this guy. Again, this looks like it's all the same set of legs. This one's the one that's using the Deathwatch heavy weapon, so either the frag cannon or the Infernus heavy bolter. Really quite fun to see them on Gravis armor, I think. And then the alternative build is a heavy bolt rifle with an underslung grenade launcher. I don't think that's a weapon that we've seen previously. Next up, we've got a Tacticus one that looks like he's got the choice between, I want to say, an Incursor Pattern bolt carbine. Though if all the war gear's free and just for rule of cool factor, I'd be more tempted by the Plasma Incinerator, so basically getting a Hellblaster into the unit. Then there's a Phobos Operative, who it seems that you can either build as an Infiltrator style one with the little antennas that he gets either side of his helmet, or you can build him as a sort of Reaver style looking guy with a paired set of combat blades. Certainly feels like a knife fighter type guy is a pretty common trope for Kill Team. Seems that he's got a grav shoot as well, though I don't expect he'll be able to deep strike in 40k unless the rest of his units just get in there via the Teleportarium. Then we've got a dual build melee specialist, either taking a Deathwatch heavy Thunderhammer, currently really quite fearsome with a big damage 3 profile, or being able to be assembled with the Deathwatch Storm Shield and a great big power mace. That one feels a little bit similar to the bit. That bit feels a little bit similar to the part from the original Deathwatch Veterans kit. Again, if it's an either or choice here for gameplay, I suspect that the heavy Thunderhammer is going to be the one to go for. I guess it's not 100% confirmed whether or not these are literally all the options that you can assemble them with. I kind of wonder whether or not there might be options to, say, just give them all a generic weapon loadout. I feel like for the more big effort kill teams, you can usually give the vast majority of the squad just one basic weapon still. And if that was such a thing, I guess it'd be a bolt carbine. 2 of the kill team specialist members seem to have that. I would kind of hope that that would be the case. I feel like that might tip the balance between it being a fairly flexible feeling kit and being a slightly monopose feeling one. There's also nothing to particularly denote a black shield in the unit, though I guess you could just do that from the shoulder pads and more of a lore style feel, and maybe make it the Blade Master one if you wanted. For people's reaction to the models, I feel like it's actually been maybe a little complicated. Broadly speaking, I think people quite like the general appearance of them. When I did a channel poll, they were voted pretty high relative to other things that were revealed. You guys gave them a 3.9 out of 5. I feel like compared with other releases like some of the Space Wolves and the Emperor's Children that came out earlier in the year, that's maybe alright but not super standout. I think they do look the purpose. There's some common criticisms and talking points I've seen about them are just they're not enormously crazily different models. Better or worse, at least fairly standard Primaris with some Deathwatch iconography put on top of the armour, more so than being hugely intrinsically different to anything else. Plus, at least a fair few people aren't too happy about the limited war gear options, if essentially the entire Deathwatch army is going to be 5 models with multi-build options. I'm not sure people are going to be quite so crazy for that. I'd say particularly if there's no more standard bolt carbine style option. Even if they have had a little mixed reception, they still seem to be the single most popular thing that Games Workshop revealed for Warhammer 40k on the Friday reveal show. For actual new models that people wanted to pick up, these guys were voted the absolute clear winner. 330 people said that they wanted to get a Deathwatch kill team. The next closest on the new models front were the Raven Guard character and the Necrons kill team, that they were trailing by around about 100. If counting the Combat Patrol one, the Imperial Fist box wasn't too far behind the Deathwatch. As mentioned, rules-wise, they should absolutely get a new Warhammer 40k datasheet. They generally have done these for kill teams, even some of the ones that had slightly more minor differences, but there are some fairly big ones here with a Plasma Incinerator and Gravis armor in the squad. Currently the rules they're likely to be updating are these Deathwatch veteran ones that have a lot of the same gear. Available in squads of 5 to 10 for either 100 or 200 points. They might fairly often tend to get loaded out with Infernus heavy bolters, frag cannons and the big Deathwatch Thunderhammers. Really quite a scary force with some OC that can jump out of a rhino and scrap hard with the enemy, maybe led by a Watchmaster or Judas here perhaps. The new datasheet could have a whole bunch of rules implications. I guess if it's going to be Tacticus, and particularly if there's Gravis there as well, you might not be able to transport them in rhinos anymore. Seems just kind of likely with Tacticus things in general. For squad size, I'd expect that you'd probably still be able to field them in 5-man squads. Some kill teams have been 10-man only, but given that these ones seem to be 2 copies of the same sprue, I think that's probably good odds for them being able to be fielded individually. I guess in the extreme distant future, after the kill team cycle has run from these guys, they might eventually get a solo release for Warhammer 40k in a squad of 5, but that'd be a very, very long way off. You get an extra 2 wounds in the squad, I suppose, due to the Gravis armor, though I feel like the single biggest change for the squad is likely to be war gear. The Deathwatch Veterans datasheet is still really quite a flexible one relative to most other things. and it could mean that certain default loadouts and bits of kits that aren't represented here might be gone, things like Deathwatch shotguns or giving the entire squad power weapons for a more melee loadout. I feel like the datasheet's probably going to be really quite a complicated one, maybe similar to the Plague Marines for which models are able to take what. I guess judging by the dual builds per 5-man squad, you might be able to take a heavy thunderhammer, a frag cannon, a plasma incinerator and a xenophase blade, and then the last one have a bolt carbine or knives. That feels like it'd be a pretty punchy close range squad there. I guess the xenophase blade might only be limited to being used in a squad of 10 unless the sergeant's able to take that. I guess that would imply you'd be able to double up on the heavy weapons, so you could have 2 frag cannons in a squad of 10. Though given that they share the Gravis model, I suppose you wouldn't be able to take, say, 2 frag cannons and 2 Infernus heavy bolters. So as normal with Games Workshop kit updates, it does seem that probably some options are going to be invalidated, and maybe only have representation in Legends if they do that. Similarly, it looks like it restricts the heavy thunderhammers a little bit as well, only having 1 per squad of 5 rather than 2. The other question could be leader access. I think most likely would be that they just keep the same ones they have now, the Watchmaster Artemis and the Tacticus armoured characters. It really wouldn't be out of the question though for them to restrict things to just the Deathwatch unique characters. That does seem to have been the recent trend with things like Space Wolves. Overall, going by 10th edition standards, I suspect whatever rules they have will represent this kit very well, and other things that you might have built up less well. I certainly hope that you will be able to field entire squads worth of bolters though, given that Deathwatch are well known for their special issue ammunition, and those are the things that tend to use it. It'll be interesting to see what happens for the Deathwatch going forward with this, as well as the Deathwatch Veterans datasheet in their own index. It'll also replace the one for the Imperial Agents, I presume, and then hopefully the rest of the Primaris kill teams stay as is. The Fortis one, I guess, is also in Tacticus armour, though it's not a mixed kill team in the same way as this is, so hopefully there's enough room in Games Workshop's mind both for the new set and the Fortis team. Kind of interesting to think about the design pipeline for this one as well. It looks like they might well have been designed with the sort of overall thought being that Deathwatch aren't going to be a mainstream 40k faction anymore, so this is more going to be an Agents of the Imperium release. I'd imagine that's the sort of decision that gets made years in advance from Games Workshop, so it sort of remains to be seen whether or not they do Primaris updates for other bits of the faction, or maybe a wider release wave similar to things like Blood Angels, Space Wolves, or the Black Templars. We have already seen kill team kits come out that have been sort of the harbingers of a new range. We had the Kroot Farstalker kit, and they preceded the Kroot wider range release, and the Deathcore Krieg Veterans that preceded the Deathcore wider release. Would be kind of cool if these are the first ones, and then Deathwatch follow, say, a year or two after, as seems to have been the pattern there. Otherwise, for wider Deathwatch releases, I guess not impossible, they could try and release something to tie in with Astartes 2, which I guess they know has to be kind of big. Maybe the Watchmaster or Captain Artemis could be interesting enough, unless they decided to release miniatures literally to tie in. In any case though, let me know your thoughts as to the new Deathwatch kill team. What do you make of the miniatures and any potential rules updates for them? Or would you be tempted to pick up a squad of these? I guess with Agents of the Imperium rules, you will be able to technically add them into just about any Warhammer 40k army out there, if you did want them along for fun factor. I look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below though. Finally, before I go, I'll just quickly cycle back to Tabletop Stronghold in the video sponsor to talk through a few examples from their range of magnetic carry cases. These are how many miniatures can fit on one tray, around about 90 odd infantry or 6 armigers if maximally loaded. And then they have cases of different heights for those trays. There's the mini one here that's still big enough to transport a few big chunky tanks and a whole bunch of Terminators, around about £70 or $75 with the sale code. That includes shipping, but might be exclusive of VAT or import duties. Then there's the more standard size one, a fairly tall one as you can see by the Chaos Knight on the bottom floor here. Should be big enough for really quite a lot of medium-sized armies. I'll leave the dimensions on the screen, and they all come with a starter supply of magnets to mount to the bases too. Then there's the really big one in the XL one. This one basically 2 of the previous attached together, enough room for certain entire collections in here. Check them out in the video description, use that AT25 code if you want to pick up anything, but in any case a big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. I'll leave that there for now though. Look forward to hearing your thoughts, and feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, then there's a Patreon page linked down in the video description as well. Channel patrons get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, occasional votes to see what sort of things comes next, an automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.